Hey, welcome back to the Soul Pod. This is Stacy. Today I'm going to talk about one of those topics that I keep coming back around to because it's, I think, been underlined a lot in the last 4 weeks, just how messed up media is and how untrustworthy it is. So you ready? Let's get into this. Mark Twain once said something like, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled." And I think that I love that quote because the truth of it vibrates so much to me. Do you know someone in your life that you've disagreed with or had disagreements with that you are absolutely certain of a fact? You can prove it 12 different ways, and you know that this person doesn't believe it because they bought some other narrative, but there's nothing you can say to change their mind. That's what Twain was talking about. And there's an awful lot of this. The world now, it seems, I don't know if it's the underlying globalist movement that's trying to push this, but there's definitely something under the surface, behind the scenes, that's trying to divide us. I know you all feel it. The last 4 weeks have been outrageously wild in world history, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk and all the wild news stuff that's come out. But what I want to look at is how this is happening and some of the insidious ways that it's happening. And I've got a couple pieces of evidence for you, what I would call proof, but you can take it however you'd like to and decide if it's proof for yourself. Things that'll show you not just what's going on, but also how to overcome those things where you may be being fooled, or you may be in a position where they're trying to fool you, and you're going to avoid falling into that trap of buying into a lie so you don't later have to dig your way out of believing it. Here we go. The author Michael Crichton came up with this great term called the Gell-Mann amnesia effect. Uh, if you've heard this story, you'll enjoy it again, probably. If you haven't heard it, I know you'll like it. Uh, Crichton talked about his friend, whose last name was Gell-Mann. And this guy's actually a a Nobel Prize winning physicist, really bright dude. And so Michael Crichton and he were sitting around having breakfast or lunch or something one day, and they were going over the paper. And Gelman was reading the paper, and it was talking about something about physics, and he just said, they're just absolutely lying about this. They don't know what they're talking about. This is completely inaccurate. And recognizing that this paper just did shoddy work on this. If they didn't absolutely lie, they were at least just making some ridiculous nonsense up and acting like they had a clue. And then after that, very shortly, he flipped the page to the politics section, and he just started talking about how much he fully agrees with this and how they really nailed it. And Crichton called it the Gell-Mann amnesia effect because this guy had this sort of cognitive dissonance moment where he openly admits to himself that this paper has no problem making stuff up, lying, being completely inaccurate, yet at the same time can flip the page, and it's like he totally forgot that this paper does not do their due diligence and cannot be trusted. How many times have you done this with a news source? How many times have you watched your favorite news channel and gone, "Oh man, they got that wrong"? And this is especially strong when it's about something we know about. I've had this happen to me many times, and we've all had it to a certain extent where even your favorite news channel, you go, "Yeah, that's not accurate. That's not right." And then, 5 minutes later, another story comes on and you're all lit up and you're like, "That's right, man. You nailed it, nailed it." But how do you know you can trust them? How do you know they're on your side? How do you protect against it? You see, what it is our brains, we like an easy story. We like something we can agree with. We have the group think thing that happens. And, I've got a great video on group think, probably about 4 or 5 videos before this, if you want to look at what groupthink's all about. It's insidious, but we like a good story that's easy to believe, to easy understand, and because of that, we really easily forget about the past lies that our chosen news source is telling us, right, or has told us. We forget about things like, by the way, all channels are guilty of this. MSNBC ran with the Russia hoax thing for multiple years, like claiming it as absolute God-given truth, right? Not doing any really any journalistic uh, digging to qualify any of this, to prove any of this, to make sure that it was accurate. Just running with the story. Fox News got a bunch of stuff wrong too. They ended up paying a giant fine for getting some stuff wrong. So it doesn't matter left or right, doesn't really matter. All news agencies screw up to a certain extent. There's a lot of reasons they do this. Sometimes it's simply the profit motive, in that the more eyes are tuned into your station, the higher you get a charge for your advertising. So that's a big profit motive. So you don't have to have some insidious reason for doing it other than making money. That's enough of a reason. But some of these organizations are also biased for other reasons. No need to go into that a lot right now. So the first piece of evidence I want to bring for your attention and for you to check out here is Wikipedia. Wikipedia. I noticed a trend with Wikipedia starting, and this really, it sort of was creeping in a little before, because I like to pay attention to this stuff. But when the whole COVID thing happened, I saw them within a short period of time change stories, like change a person's bio, and and like overnight. Like I looked at it one day and it said this thing, and the next day or 2 days later, whatever it was, it said this thing, and it was a glaring difference. It went from this guy is wonderful to this guy is evil, and and very biased in terms of like the way they were portraying him, choosing really interesting words, anti-vaxxer and all this, and we'll dive into that. But the reason I want to bring up Wikipedia is because the co-founder of Wikipedia recently came out on a podcast interview and talked about how he's really disappointed with what has happened with him. And he actually even suggested a handful of ways that they can actually redeem themselves, fix themselves, and take care of this problem that's been created by the biases that have crept in. So Wikipedia has a list of what they call perennial sources. You can actually go on Wikipedia and find these. So it's a list of the approved news outlets and the disapproved news outlets, and the news outlets that are only good for some things but not good for other things. And if you look at them, you'll see that there's a massive left-leaning bias. Like New York Times is okay, CNN is okay, but there are other, like nothing from Fox News is allowed at all. Breitbart not allowed at all. Um, Rolling Stone is allowed as a news source, but Rolling Stone magazine is not for political source. Stuff like that, where they'll kind of split hairs with it. But there is definitely uh, a lean to the left, and this shouldn't surprise us that much, because every single news organization that's out there, everyone, whether conservative or liberal leaning, they all exist in cities, and find a large city that any of these big news organizations reside in that doesn't lean left. I mean, most cities lean left. That's just the way it is. So what it is when you pull from the people who live in these cities, what are you going to get? You're going to get people that lean left that end up working in these organizations, because that's who predominantly live in cities. Conservative people tend to live less likely in cities, and there's a couple small exceptions to that, but for the most part, your largest cities, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, places where you're most likely to find newsrooms are heavily left leaning. So of course you're going to need a left leaning bias. So that shouldn't be a surprise. With Wikipedia, it's a different sort of deal, because there seems to be an intended bias. There seems to be a programmed bias, an intentional bias. It's been brought to their attention many times, and they've made no attempt to change it. Now, the one example I was talking about with Wikipedia is a guy named Geert Vanderbosch, who is an incredibly high-level virologist, like one of the top virologists in the world. Had been recognized as such for many, many years. When I first heard his name, he was on a podcast talking about his concerns about rolling out this vaccine during the pandemic, because he was concerned that virology shows you very clearly that you don't vaccine in the middle of a pandemic. You vaccinate before a pandemic. It is preventative. It's not a treatment. And when you do it after the fact, what happens is you get all these variants that'll happen. And he was like blowing the whistle on this thing, saying this is really bad. He's sending open letters to the World Health Organization and anybody that would listen, because he's like, and I know this is true because I was really sick as a small child, and so I've always been very in tune with everything to do with my immune system. So when he said this, I was like, yeah, of course, everybody knows that, don't they? Like I've always known that, because like I said, I was sick as a kid, so I paid attention to a lot of that stuff. So when I read this, I was, well, who is this dude? I've never heard of him. I mean, virologists, they don't get baseball cards, so you don't know their name. So I looked the guy up and I'm like, yeah, he's huge. Like he's worked with all these organizations. He's got this great resume. The Gates Foundation adores him. He's like on their board. I was like, well, this is very okay. This guy's got some legitimate background, so he's a trustworthy source apparently. Not a fan of Gates, but whatever. Gates doesn't hire dumb people. So then, I started seeing his new name turn up in the news, and not in a flattering way. They were just saying, "Oh, these crackpot doctors." Like crackpot, like he's not a crackpot doctor. I seen the guy's, resume, and I think this must have been a week later. I went back to Wikipedia and I read his page again. It had been completely. I mean, it's like somebody went and vandalized his page because it instead of opening with one of the greatest virologists in the world, highly acclaimed, blah blah. It started with uh, anti-vaxxer, crackpot, whatever. Crackpot wasn't in there, but it was something like it was started with anti-vaxxer, and he's not an anti-vaxxer. That's not what he was saying. I heard the interview. The interview was he was saying we must be concerned about this because we don't want variants to happen. By the way, what happened? How many variants can you count that came out of that pandemic because of all this stuff that he warned about, right? So it wasn't that he didn't know what he was talking about, it's that he was saying things that weren't popular. And because someone has an agenda in the background of Wikipedia, someone has someone's ear at Wikipedia, someone was able to go in and change that. And by the way, you can still go look at this guy's page. It's hard to find, and when you do find it, it's not flattering. Geert Vanderbosch. I'll share his name so you can look him up if you want to. I don't recommend going to Wikipedia, and I definitely don't recommend going to Wikipedia for anything political. The political bias on Wikipedia is absolute. There's no doubt about it. It's absolutely provable, and it's not that hard to prove. It's great for other stuff. Most history stuff, it's really great for and all that. But I used to donate to Wikipedia, and I just want to say here, for the record, do not donate to Wikipedia. Don't give money to people who will lie to you. I'm not going to do it, and I want you share this with everybody you know. Tell them not to give money to Wikipedia. Wikipedia can roll over and die if they want to. What I'm really excited about is that X is now coming out with Grokpedia, and this is something we're going to get to as a tool. Grok now, there's anybody out there that has the energy to do it and isn't lazy can fact check any news story. If you see anything, and I do this all the time with like social media posts, I'm like, wow, that's shocking. And I'm like, oh, hold on, but is it true? And all you gotta do is just copy that, drop it into Grok AI. If you're not familiar with Grok AI, it's the X platform, formerly Twitter, the X platform's AI. And if you have an X account, you can use it. You can download a separate app, in fact. But you can take information, drop it in. This is just like ChatGPT will also work for you. You can drop it in, and you can ask it, tell me about this story. And don't lead it at all. Just say, tell me about this story. I found this on social media, and it'll tell you if it's bogus or not. And it surprises me how often these stories are bogus. And they usually are the ones that make you, holy crap, I got to share that. And you're like, but should I? And when you check it, oftentimes you find, well, no, it was nonsense. And especially the political stuff. The political stuff always seems to have a bend to it. Bends left, bends right. But you got to make sure if you're going to share something or you're believing something, more importantly, that you're believing something that's true. After all, once you've been fooled, it's going to be hard for someone to convince you you've been fooled. That's because your ego's involved. Once your ego has full buy-in and you've shouted from the rooftops, now you have to do a mea culpa, not just to the world, but to yourself if you admit that you're wrong. So your ego is really good at like putting that super glue on those ideas and making them stick to your insides. So it's always best to catch whether or not you're being fooled before you get fooled. Follow me? Now, another example I want to talk, since I'm trashing Wikipedia today, and again, looking forward to Grokpedia coming out, which is coming soon. But Wikipedia, one of the things, another story I saw, and this, you can go check this, this is still factual as of today. So everybody knows, and I don't think anyone's arguing that Bill Clinton didn't fly. I mean, he flew at least 26 times on the Lolita Express, the airplane that Jeffrey Epstein had that flew to the island, right? He went to his island at least 26 times that we know of, at least, and probably more. That's absolutely a fact. Not making anything up. totally provable. Look it up on any AI. And it's also known that Trump was a friend of his. They knew each other socially for many years. There's no evidence that he ever flew on the Lolita Express to the island, but they knew each other. So both of these things are facts. Okay, no bias involved in either of those things. Now, which one of those is worse? Knowing that someone went to an island that we know was a hotbed of that kind of criminal activity, you know, terrible stuff that I'm not going to say here because I don't approve of it and I don't want to use those words, or knowing somebody socially. One of those is clearly worse than the other. However, if you go to the Wikipedia page of either of these men, you will see that on Bill Clinton's page, there are only 3 mentions of Jeffrey Epstein, and they're all his footnotes. They're all his footnotes. You can find, there's 3 mentions of him. 3. And there's nothing about him traveling to the island. There's nothing about the allegations. Just footnotes down below. Not even a section, right? Now on Trump's page, who, as I said, we have no proof ever went to the island, Epstein's mentioned 6 times, literally twice as much as mentioned on Clinton's page. And in fact, he has an article in there talking about their friendship. So there's some intent there to tie him to him more tightly than someone we know was actually going to the island. So you see the massive bias there. Now it doesn't matter. I need to point out here. I'm using this as an example of a bias that's easy to prove, and they're easy to prove because these are left-leaning organizations, so they tend to bias that direction. But it doesn't matter whether you are a liberal or a conservative when it comes to looking at this stuff. What matters is whether or not you trust the source. Now, if you're getting information that makes you go, yeah, cool, the other guys are bad, my team's good, other team bad, that's a nice feeling, but don't you want that feeling based on something you can be sure is fact and not biased? So bias works against you whether it supports your team or not. You still want the truth. That way you know that you're living your life from a position of not being fooled, as Mark Twain said. You don't want to be the one having to figure out or admit to yourself you got lied to and you bought it, right? All right, so we've looked at a lot of different stuff, right? I think it's clear to say that if you're paying attention, you know the media lies, and the media lies constantly. You can't have a 24-hour news cycle. If you're younger than, say, 40, maybe 45, you don't remember the old days when the news was at 6 and 11. You had a half an hour to an hour slot of news, and then you would go on with your regular TV programming, and then boom. It was only when CNN happened with the advent of cable. If you were born and you're 45 or older, you probably don't remember a life before cable TV. But it used to just be network news, like these network news channels, CBS, ABC, NBC, like the public airwaves, right? The channels you can't say filthy words on. That's why you can't on cable, because they're privately owned. They're not just broadcast for the whole world to see. Now, before cable, though, CNN didn't exist. CNN was the first big news network that had 24-hour-a-day news. But prior to that, news was just the basics, which was really nice growing up with that, because they would tell you this is what happened, and then they don't have all this extra time to tell you how to think about it or how to feel about it. They would just tell you, here's the news story. And then it was your job to make up your mind how you felt. Now, with the 24-hour news cycle and all these different news outlets that have their own bias, their own spin, they tell you what you should think about. Here's what we think this means. This is what happened, and this is how you should feel. And there's a ton of speculation, a ton of personal perspective that may or may not be right. And the reality is you can't be right 100% of the time, and certainly not when you're just going with opinion to fill the space, right? So that's a big problem. But there's a good solution, and this is really good news. Take control. We all have the ability now. We have the tools. As we're coming into this new AI world we're living in, where you've got stuff like Grok and you've got ChatGPT, you've got all these other great tools as well, that you can actually take control. And you take control by simply, as I mentioned, taking a piece of information, dropping it in and say, what can you tell me about this? Or is this true? Or what about this story is true? Oftentimes I'll take a story and drop it in the information that I've gotten and say, uh, you know, I read this somewhere. What can you tell me about this? And it'll say, well, these aspects of it are true. These aspects of it are not. And then you could do a follow-up question and just say, you know, what parts of them are accurate or inaccurate. And it's really quite nice. The cool thing about Grok is you can do it, just press a button and ask it. So you can do it verbally while you're driving. Just say, hey, Grok, tell me about this, which is a really nice tool. I think maybe ChatGPT is getting that now too. But so it's quick. So, and laziness is your only explanation really for why you're not fact checking the nonsense, right? So there are great tools now to actually go around these people, go around these gatekeepers, take control of actually making sure you're getting good information. And then choose your social media sources carefully too. Uh, when Musk bought X or Twitter and turned it into X, he rolled out this thing called Community Notes. And Community Notes got tackled by a bunch of different news organizations saying, that's nonsense and it'll never work. Well, it turns out that it's actually reduced. The new study shows that Community Notes, which is basically people going, I don't think it is accurate, and here's an article that I can link to say why it's not accurate, and then you actually get sort of a crowd effect. And AI is now starting to become part of that crowd effect where it can actually sort of fact check on the fly. It's reducing misinformation by 50 to 60% in this new study. So you cut your possibility of being lied to by at least half, and probably more. So that's a nice tool. And the cool thing about this is, I'm talking about X, but Meta, which is Facebook and what Instagram and some other stuff, they rolled out their own version of this. They're working on it. TikTok is doing the same thing. YouTube has one in beta testing now. They're also looking at figuring out how to apply that so that we're actually going to be able to start, fact checking ourselves instead of relying on fact checkers. Don't rely on fact checkers. Fact checkers are biased. Who's fact checking your fact checker, right? So if you're not lazy, you can quickly do it yourself. It doesn't take very much time. And once you get in the habit, you can actually make sure that you're not sharing bad information or absorbing bad information that you're going to have to later recant to yourself and take an ego hit. None of us want that, right? So I want to say another thing. Google it became like a saying in our society. It's a verb, but don't Google anything anymore. Google is one of the most, and here I am on YouTube. Sorry, this is not going to help my channel probably since they own it. But Google is biased as heck. It is, and that's me being nice. Fact check anything on Google, and don't use Google's AI either because it's attached to Google and it's got ridiculous biases built in. And you can use any other AI to ask about these biases, and it'll tell you all about it. I don't have the kind of time to actually go over the stuff to show you, but trust me, if you use any other AI and you ask about the biases that are inherent with Google, you'll find out exactly what's going on there. So don't use Google. Don't Google anything. I don't Google anything anymore. I don't have to. With Grok, I just drop information in there. It can tell me anything. Anything that I can get off Google, I can get off Grok even quicker, and I don't have to worry about the bias. So find a tool that works for you. You don't have to use Grok. Maybe you use ChatGPT, whatever it is. But with AI, you've got some really great tools at your disposal, and you can go crazy with it, right? So in closing, I just want to say, stay skeptical. Stay skeptical. Keep your eyes open. Don't trust Wikipedia. Don't trust Grok. Watch out for the Gell-Mann effect. You don't want to get the Gell-Mann effect kicking in where when you notice something's lying to you, remember it's lying to you. Don't get the amnesia, flip the page, and start believing them again just because it's convenient. Remember to verify with Grok or whatever tool you prefer that's a good quality, trusted AI. And keep your eyes open. The world is now with AI at our fingertips. We're able to fact check all the nonsense, and we don't believe fact checkers, don't need to. We have our own ability to fact check ourselves. Now, I'd like to also say, if you have anything you want to add to this, this is a really fast-moving topic because not just because of the news aspect of it, but because we are talking about technology that is changing daily. You'll listen to this 6 months from now and you go, yeah, that's all outdated. If you're listening to this in 2026, this is probably already dated information, um, because it is moving quickly. So if you have some cool tools you want to share, leave them in the notes below, because I don't know a ton of stuff, and I'm learning new stuff every day. And other people listening to this and watching this probably also would grow and gain some value from your knowledge as well. So if you got some cool tools, share them. Also, if you could, like and subscribe. Uh, the channel's growing really big every single day, and I'm really enjoying the fact that you guys are here. Uh, when you like and subscribe, you'll get a notification when a new video pops up. I try to drop one or two a week, but if you're enjoying them and you want to get regular updates, you get regular updates, and you'll find out when this stuff comes out. And if you like this, share it with others. The more the channel grows, the more videos I make. Thanks for being here. If you haven't checked out the Soul podcast yet, check it out. I think you'll like it. It's tools for a more joyful life. I think we all need that.